Join us for a beading and jewelry making workshop this season on Beads, Baubles and Jewels.
Beads, Baubles and Jewels has been brought to you in part by Beading Daily, your jewelry making resource for how-to projects, books, magazines, DVDs, events, and online learning. BeadingDaily.com. Beadalon, a manufacturer of flexible bead stringing wires, memory wire, artistic wire, stringing materials, innovative findings, and tools to help you fashion your own jewelry. Beadalon.com. Dreamtime Creations, an online supplier of crystals, findings, and jewelry making supplies since 1989. DreamtimeCreations.com. Halcraft, jewelry component manufacturer. Halcraft.com.
Hi, I'm Katie Hacker, and welcome to a new season of Beads, Baubles and Jewels. For the next months, we're featuring a jewelry making workshop with the added bonus of lots of beading techniques. We'll revisit some basic lessons each week and expand our overall knowledge with more advanced techniques. Appropriately, our first episode is getting started. It's an introduction to some of the techniques you'll use every day. We begin with Candie Cooper and a lesson on bead caps and their use featured in a necklace. Then, meet Melinda Barta with tips for making your beadwork more durable. And next, it's the first basic lesson as we feature crimping to attach a clasp. It's a workshop that's a foundation for many jewelry pieces. Finally, Kate Richbourg, metal artist extraordinaire, finishes up with the first of her metalwork lessons and beginning steps for soldering. Candie and I are up first. I'm here with author and designer Candie Cooper. And Candie, you have some great ideas for using bead caps in your designs.
Thank you, Katie.
You're
bead
welcome.
caps are one of my favorite beads of all times.
Me too, I love them, and they really make your designs pop.
They do. I brought along a few pieces where I've used them. This necklace is kind of fun. I'm going to hold up what it looks like without the bead caps. You can see
without.
Same beads, and then you know, the silver adds a lot, right? It almost looks like a vintage doily, don't you think?
It really does, and I love the way you added the ribbon too.
Thank you. I'm going to show you that a little bit later.
Great.
So basically, you're just going to take, like, you'll find bead caps come in all different finishes, all different shapes. You want to match up the diameter of your bead with the bead cap size. So if your bead cap's 12 millimeter, then you need a 12 millimeter bead cap. That's right. Okay. So if you look here, I brought a few in different shapes and sizes. And one of my other favorite thing to do, other than stringing them, you know, for a necklace or whatever, is you can string them on a bead or on a head pin, and you can use them just as a little cap. And so for earrings, this is a really slick way to get a lot of oomph.
Yeah,
really simply.
Really dress them up too.
Right. So I've got some beading wire here. I'm using a little bit heavier gauge. This is a .018 diameter beading wire, nylon coated, 49 strands, so it's ultra flexible and super strong because I have these really chunky ceramic beads. The other thing I want to point out is if you look at the edge of this bead, it's not so beautiful like the frontal surface. So bead caps can mask imperfections like that too.
Smart.
I'm especially in love with this design because I found bead caps that match these, you know, the design on the bead, if you look here, perfectly. So I've already began stringing, and you can see if I smush all of this together how these bead caps just come into play.
Yeah, and they just make it lay nice and perfect. And you know, the bead cap also reduces the hole size on that large hole bead, so you can use the wire that works with the rest of the beads in your design.
Because like on my little crystals here, the holes are really tiny compared to the ceramic beads. So when I string a bead cap on, then it's time for a ceramic bead, and you'll see that this doesn't sit super perfectly against the bead. So all you do is just take the end of it, let me pull it up here, and just smush the edges down a little bit over the edges of the bead, and then it sits
So you
better.
just shape them a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're made out of a pretty thin metal, so you can form them around all different, they're adjustable, essentially. And then you would just keep stringing. I'm gonna end with a couple crystals here.
It all looks really pretty together. I love that mixture of materials, ceramic and the metal and the crystal together. It looks so nice.
It's nice contrast, huh?
Definitely.
Thank you. So now it's time to finish the end. I like to taper down my size too, like for design.
Yeah.
When it comes to the end. And I'm using a crimp tube that has a bit of a twist to it. And that's just so it doesn't, when you actually do crimp, it doesn't damage your wire. It's a special kind of crimp tube. And then you can finish this a couple different ways. You could use a solid ring and a lobster clasp, or if you like the ribbon look, you would use 2 solid rings. You just want to make sure that the rings don't have openings like traditional jump rings.
Okay.
So we'll just go ahead and string a ring on. And then, since I have so much extra wire, I'm going to scoot down to the end so I don't waste it.
Sure. I like the way that the bead caps can really highlight the focal elements.
Yes.
You know, I mean, yours are a lot larger here, but you can also do the same kind of technique with other sizes of beads,
Right.
of course.
Right. And I always explain bead caps like they're like a mat for your picture.
Oh,
You know?
that's a great explanation. You're framing it.
Yeah, you're just framing up your bead. So
Yeah.
now the next thing I'm going to do is just flat crimp this crimp tube. So I'm just using chain nose pliers and just give it a nice squish, and it's secure. And then I would trim a little bit of this extra tail away, and then slide all of the beads down to the other end,
All right.
like so.
Now, if you are going to do the ribbon, do you have a special technique for tying it?
I will show you how I like to tie a ribbon. It just depends on how secure. Like if you're going to a crazy dance party, I would actually, because I know you go to a lot of crazy dance parties, I would actually, okay, so let's bring this plain Jane in and take
Okay.
a look. So I finished both ends with the same crimp tubes and the solid rings. And then what I like to do is just run it through. This is where a friend might help. I don't know if your
I
husband's
can be
going
your
to be
friend.
able to.
Hold it.
I don't know if your husband's going to be able to. He could probably handle this. So you would string this through your 2 rings. And then you don't want tons hanging over, but this also allows for a little bit of adjustableness. And also you could loop this piece around a couple times if you wanted it to be
Oh,
a
yeah.
bracelet and have a really funky
That would be really pretty.
bow closure. But I'm using hand-dyed silk. Now you can tie this in a knot, or what I do is kind of cheat and just make one
Make your
loop.
first.
And then you want to just make sure that you keep all your edges really flat and not let it get all twisted and gnarly, if that makes sense. Okay, and then you're just going to pull it.
Oh, and
each
you did the
tail.
little flip so that
I
it's
did the
all
flip.
facing the right direction.
Yeah, and then I forgot some scissors, but I always like to cut the end of the ribbon at an angle.
Very nice, the finishing touch.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at your bow on the necklace over here.
Yeah, I love this. And it really, with the colors and with the beads, you can wear it on the side. You can also turn it around to the back. And then if you have short hair or whatever.
Looks great.
Yeah, you can see that
And I like your
surprise in the
tip for
back.
using it as a bracelet too.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
Very fun.
We'll do that next.
Great idea.
So I brought along a couple other pieces to show you just how you can change from, this is a pretty fancy look compared to this turquoise. And
This is everyday wear right here. I love this. Yeah, it looks
right.
great.
And I kind of like that urban cowgirl look,
Definitely.
We love our cowboy look.
Goes with the boots.
Yes, that's right.
And you even use some of these hematite color bead caps here. Kind of bring, with those sparkly faceted beads and the gemstones, I think it just really helps tie it all together.
Yeah, again, you have that great contrast, which is what makes jewelry kind of interesting.
Yeah, and you don't have to just use them on round beads. You have them on the rondelles there. It looks great.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the earrings.
The earrings are go with that tip I showed you earlier, where I just used this hematite bead cap on top of the crystal as a little bead cap, but then I topped the next bead up with a super tiny bead cap, and that gives you a nice cohesive look.
Oh yeah, they're so pretty, and this is a technique we'll use every day. Thanks so much,
promise.
Candie.
Thank you, Katie.
We'll be right back. I'm here with beadwork editor and author Melinda Barta. Welcome, Melinda.
Hi.
Yeah, and you have some great ideas for making durable beadwork, and that's so important because today is all about getting started.
Good. Yes, we put so much time into our beadwork that it's really important to take care of it so it can last for future generations. And also, you should share these tips with people you gift your jewelry to, because non-beaders often don't understand how delicate some of these pieces can be.
Oh yeah, because they do seem really strong and intricate when you're done. So what is something that people should always do when they're getting ready to work?
Well, thread is the absolute foundation of all seed beadwork. So if you're working with nylon threads, it's very important to stretch it. You'd rather get the stretch out now as opposed to later.
That makes sense. It's a great tip.
And if you ever have a thread that begins to fray, just stop what you're doing and replace it. It is worth the time to just start a new thread, and you can also protect your thread by using thread conditioners or bead wax, or even the microcrystalline wax is a favorite among beaders.
Okay.
So a little tip for stitching with crystals is make sure you always pull your thread away from the hole. So directly away from the hole, because if you pull your thread at an angle, you can cut it.
Right.
And often with crystals, what I like to do is work one pass in pretty light tension. So add the crystals, get them in place, and then do at least one or two other passes to really set them in place.
And just so you have that extra reinforcement with the thread too.
Exactly. And if one thread broke, that buys you some time, because
Sure.
you could notice there's a problem while the other threads are hanging on to those expensive crystals.
Yeah, makes sense.
And when you're ending a thread, you tie a knot. Make sure you don't trim it right after you tie that knot. Weave through a few beads after you tie it, because no matter what, that knot will find a way to come undone. So if you leave a tail, then it won't slip out.
Okay, so you weave it back into the work.
Correct, and then you can trim it. When you're working a piece like these rings that are zipped along the outside, I like to double my thread. You can either start a project with your thread already doubled, but if you want to double it mid-project, I have this great tip I learned from Cynthia Rutledge. You just pull back on the tail thread until it extends beyond the base of the working thread, and there it is, it's doubled. You just continue stitching and you can trim it later.
Perfect.
And a note on tension, if you use too tight of tension, you can actually create sections of beads that can snap. And so as I'm working, I like to keep the work pliable. Just after a few rows or rounds, take a break and work it back and forth in your hands. And a quick note about these earrings is that they're worked in size 15s. So if you know you're working in 15s, choose a thread that's smaller. Like, say you might want to use a 4-pound thread if you know that you're going to be working
very tiny.
Yeah, and if you're going to be working several passes, because if you work too many passes of a thick thread, there again you can cause bead breakage as you're working.
Right.
And for some tips for finishing your work, when you're adding on the clasp, use a new thread, because if the clasp thread breaks and it's attached to the rest of the thread you used to make the main piece, you can ruin the integrity of the main one, and it's much easier just to redo the clasp
Oh yeah, that's
connection.
a great tip too, because if you have any breakage at all, it's more likely to be there
Exactly.
at the clasp.
Yep.
And this is beautiful.
Thank you. This is a great example of it's worked in square stitch, and that left me with exposed threads along the edge of the work. So to protect those exposed threads from wear and tear, I just added a little whip stitch edging of size 15s.
It looks great too.
Thanks. And kind of back to our discussion about clasps, is if you're going to be working with magnetic clasps or snaps, remember those are going to get a lot of wear and tear. So stitch those many, many times, because that's where most of the wear is going to come from.
So you'll do a lot more reinforcing there at the ends than you would do throughout the rest of the piece.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about if you want to do some air travel with your jewelry or send it away?
Yep, this is a great way, especially working for the magazine. We get a lot of submissions in, and this is a great way to send your beadwork. It's not pretty, it's just a piece of cardboard and floral wire, but you just poke a few holes in the cardboard and you can tie down your piece, and you know that it won't get kinked along the way or broken.
Good idea. And what about storing?
Storing. At home, I actually keep most of my jewelry in a drawer.
Me too.
Oh, good. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I spent so much time, I should keep things on display. But really, it's best to just keep it out and keep it flat. But if you do want to hang it up, neck forms are really nice. As opposed to putting tension on just one spot on a jewelry hook, a neck form kind of takes some of the pressure off that one point. And this last necklace down here, I just wanted to mention that I've sprayed the piece with clear acrylic spray. I've heard a lot of beaders doing that to help protect the finish, but go very light on the coats, because if you do too much, you can kind of make the piece a little sticky. So if you do add any kind of finishing sprays, be very careful and test it out first.
Oh, those are all really great tips. And I love the necklace you're wearing. That is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll be learning how to make those links in a later show, this series.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, thank you so much, Melinda. This has been really great. And we will be right back. Today's jewelry making workshop is about crimping to attach a clasp. Now, this is a technique you're going to use every day. So let me explain how crimping tools work. There's a smaller size, the standard size, and where you get the size is in the notches in the jaws of the pliers. So smallest, and then the standard one, and then the largest style. Now there's also a smaller tool. This is a pocket style of tool in the standard size plier, and what you'll use is the one that works for the crimp beads and tubes that you're using. So the difference between tubes and beads is you have cylindrical shaped little tubes. I like these for attaching clasps. And then you have also crimp beads. And these are smaller, they're gonna be less obtrusive in a design. You would especially use these if you're creating illusion pieces. So the way that you do it is you just pass your beading wire through your crimp. And in this case, I'm using a crimp tube, and I choose the crimp and the wire. You can look at the packaging for which size goes with which, but it's pretty easy to tell because you'll know when you try it, if your wire passes through twice, you're good. So you want to fill up as much space inside the crimp as possible. So of course, clasps and crimps come in all kinds of different metallic colors. You can mix them together for more of a mixed look, or you could use a matching one. I chose this antique brass clasp, and I have a silver crimp tube here, and you can see how the wires are both going in. Now this one is such a larger wire that it's filling up more space inside the crimp tube. If you do have extra wire extending from the end, you'd want to make sure that the ends are parallel. I can tell mine are because they are not crossed inside the crimp. So you would just adjust this. You can leave a slightly larger loop like this if you're going to use a crimp cover. Now I'm going to come in with a standard size crimping tool, and you want to just use the outer jaws of the tool to make it into an oval shape. And I'll be honest, I don't do this every single time, but the 3-step process is going to give you the most durable closure. So outer to make an oval, and then you're going to squeeze it in the inner jaws, and it makes a little crease in the surface of the crimp. So when you look at the back of it, you'll see that it has a little line going through the center like that, and that's how you know that you're ready to fold it. So now you're going to use the outer jaws of the crimping tool, and you'll just squeeze that, and it rounds it a little bit, and it folds it without compressing the wire inside the crimp. Now you can also attach a crimp cover, and a nifty little trick for crimp covers is if you don't have a crimp that matches, you can cover it up with a crimp cover that does. And crimp covers come in different metallic colors and styles as well, so just choose the one that looks good with your design. Now this is the standard size crimping tool. I'm going to change to the larger one because you'll see that it has much larger notches. We'll use the outer notch to make that crimp cover close. So you'll just squeeze it gently, make sure that you don't smush it, and close so that you can just barely see the seam there. And that gives you a really nice finished look, and it also won't cause any scratching at the back of the neck, and it makes it really comfortable to wear. So let me show you one more style of crimp, and this is an easy crimp closure because it has a tiny coil in between the two metal bars, and that coil is what compresses onto the wire, and I love this closure because it's so simple to use. All you do is place the wire into the end of the crimp, and then you use the outer jaws on your large crimping tool to squeeze that together. So it compresses that coil and then holds the wire in place. And you can attach a lobster clasp or a spring ring clasp to the end, and you have a nice, clean closure. That's our crimping lesson for today. I'm here with designer and author Kate Richbourg and Wire Artist of the Year. So happy to have you.
So glad to be back, Katie. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a great season. And today we're talking all about getting started. And you have some ideas for setting up your soldering workspace.
That's right. I think it's really important to be prepared when you're soldering. And I think the small little setup works perfectly in just about everybody's soldering space.
Okay.
So what I've got here is a little cookie sheet. And that's your fireproof surface. And what I like about the cookie sheet is that it has a little lip or a little edge around it. So as you're soldering, if something might accidentally fall off of your soldering surface onto the metal, the little lip is going to prevent any hot metal from rolling off onto the floor, or more importantly, on your lap.
It's also really quick and easy to store when you're finished.
Exactly. You can just pick it up and put it away and get it out the next time you're ready to solder.
Good idea.
We have a little kiln brick here. This is actually our surface that we're going to be soldering on. We've got our little quench cup as well as some soldering tweezers here. And if you don't have this at home, you could just use a nice little Pyrex bowl or something like that.
Okay.
We, of course, have our butane microtorch. Very safe to use, but we want to make sure that we're working in a well-ventilated area. So when I turn on this torch and when I work at home, I make sure that I'm sitting by, an open window or an open door to make sure that the air is coming through.
Okay.
We also got some safety glasses. And of course, we've got our solder, our paste solder here, and our solder picks.
And I noticed that you labeled your solder to make it nice and easy when you're ready to use.
I did, because when you're soldering and you want to grab something quickly, you might make a mistake. So easy, medium, and hard. Right there, I've just labeled them right on the tops. And of course, I have a blue pick for easy, a yellow for the medium, and a red for the hard, so I don't cross-contaminate those solders.
Oh, okay, so you want to keep them separate.
You do, just so, because the melting points are different, so we want to keep them separate when we're working with them.
Okay, good. And so then we also have a saw. We've got some...
Yeah, we've got some cut lube here to lubricate our saw blade, and we've also got some shears here, and we're going to use these to cut our metal tiles for our sampler, for the beginning of our sampler.
Okay, well let's talk for a minute about the sampler, because I just love this idea of practicing the techniques, and each one you can try out on these little squares before you use them on your jewelry projects.
Yeah, exactly. Copper is a much more economical metal to use than, let's say, sterling silver. So I think that the sampler really works well for students because they're not so worried about messing up. And if you do mess up, you've only messed up on that little teeny piece of copper.
No big deal, you just try again.
No big deal, try it again. And once you've mastered those designs, mastered those techniques, then you can move on to the projects in the end of the book, and you'll be totally successful.
Great, and you're going to be back later in the series too to show us some of those techniques from your samplers.
Yeah.
But so if people want to set up their tiles at home, how would they get started? What gauge of metal are you using?
Well, we're going to use 24 gauge metal for those samplers, and like I said, I have copper ready to go here. And it's really easy to mark the metal. We're going to make little 1-inch squares here. So I have a handy dandy little tool here. This is called a divider, and I have my ruler. And I just open the little legs of the divider so they measure 1 inch apart, just like that. Then I line up one edge of my divider, just like so. And this little point on the divider is going to just go ahead and make a little mark as I pull the divider down. So you can see that's my little line. And then I'm just going to use either my jeweler's saw or my shears and cut that so I have a little strip.
Okay, now do you need to do anything else to the metal before you solder it?
Well, that's a good question. Mostly this metal is fairly clean. If it has a lot of fingerprints or if it has any grease or anything like that on the surface, I would go ahead and just pickle it, or sometimes I give it a nice little scrub with a little bit of little maybe bleach-free cleanser or an abrasive
pad.
Right, or an abrasive pad.
Especially if it's shiny, then it takes off that surface.
Exactly, and then it'll be ready to go. the nicer these pieces, these little sampler pieces are going to be, the better your finished pieces are going to be too.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you a question about the torch. People who have never used a torch before are familiar with creme brulee torch. Is there a difference between that and the one that you use for jewelry?
I always say if you have a torch at home, try it out because you never know if it's going to work. The thing about these jewelers' torches is, specifically this torch, is the flame is really large and the chamber is big, so you've got a lot of burn time on this. Sometimes kitchen torches are a little smaller, but for some of these projects you don't need that much heat, so your kitchen torch certainly might work. For larger pieces, you might have to pop up to a torch that's a little bigger, but I say, you know what? Check and see what you have, try it out. It's only on the sampler squares, so if it doesn't work, you can always, try again with a torch that's larger.
Right, okay. And about the torch with the flame, is there anything that we need to pay special attention to if you are testing between the creme brulee torch and the, I guess you call it a kitchen torch,
right,
and the jeweler's torch?
Well, I think the proof is really when you actually start to use it. As you turn your torch on, and you'll see how large the flame is, and as it's heating your sampler piece or your sampler tile. If it comes up to temperature pretty quickly, then you're fine. But if you're having trouble getting that piece up to temperature, an even temperature to get your solder to flow, then that's really going to show you, nope, that's not the right torch for you.
Okay, well, these are great tips, and we're ready to get started, and I can't wait until you come back to show us more techniques.
I can't wait to share them with you.
Kate.
Thanks, Katie.
If you're an accomplished jewelry artist or a beginner just starting out, we have a workshop for you. Next week is a lesson on dangles and drops. I hope you'll join us.
Instructions for today's projects, plus other ideas, techniques, and tutorials are available on the web at beadsbaublesandjewels.com. This is Show 1801. If you enjoyed today's show and want to see more projects and great guests, download individual episodes for $2.99 each or order a complete DVD set of the entire Beads, Baubles and Jewels Series 1800 for $29.95 plus shipping and handling at beadsbaublesandjewels.com. Don't miss a single episode. Beads, Baubles and Jewels has been brought to you in part by Beading Daily, your jewelry making resource for how-to projects, books, magazines, DVDs, events, and online learning. beadingdaily.com. Beadalon, a manufacturer of flexible bead stringing wires, memory wire, artistic wire, stringing materials, innovative findings, and tools to help you fashion your own jewelry. Beadalon.com. Dreamtime Creations, an online supplier of crystals, findings, and jewelry making supplies since 1989. Dreamtimecreations.com. Halcraft, jewelry component manufacturer. Halcraft.com.